Here on WNYC, it's Marketplace. On the show tonight, in today's housing market, it's becoming more and more common for first-time buyers to turn to their parents when they're purchasing a home.
As it becomes more necessary for parents to step in and help their children buy their first homes, it has the effect of making it that much harder for other people to break into the housing market when they don't have that help.
We'll have that story next on Marketplace. More All Things Considered coming your way at 7 o'clock. 75 degrees right now in New York City. It's partly sunny. We'll see temperatures fall into the upper 50s overnight. And then for tomorrow, we're looking at mostly sunny skies, high around 75 in the afternoon. Stay with us. You're listening to WNYC. It's Monday evening at 6:30.
Support for WNYC comes from The Met. Now on view, a new exhibition tells the story of the creative visionary who shaped Tiffany & Co. Museum admission is pay what you wish for New Yorkers. Learn more at metmuseum.org.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager. Whatever your summer plans, Bitwarden can allow secure access to accounts and devices. Available for download at bitwarden.com.
On the show today, companies and industries playing catch-up, from Apple to an airline to the energy grid. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Amazon Business, helping provide a smarter, easier way to get the supplies businesses need to thrive. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying. And by Condor Airlines, offering nonstop service from 13 U.S. gateways to Frankfurt, Germany, plus seamless connections to over 100 European travel destinations at condor.com. And by Betterment, the automated investing platform that helps make it easy to be invested for the long term. Learn more at betterment.com. Investing involves risk.
In New York, I'm Kristen Schwab in for Kai Risdall. It's Monday, June 10th. Thanks for listening. NVIDIA is Wall Street's darling right now. The AI chip maker's stock split went into effect today. The company's stock price has more than doubled this year after tripling in 2023. It even briefly surpassed Apple last week as the second most valuable company in the U.S. Speaking of Apple and AI, today at its developer conference, Apple announced new AI integrations for text, email, photos, and Siri. It's also partnering with OpenAI to add the capabilities of ChatGPT into operating systems. Marketplace's Megan McCarty-Carino has more on where Apple stands in the AI race.
In true Apple style, the company has a branded name for the new AI features.
Introducing Apple Intelligence.
CEO Tim Cook said Apple's offerings would be unique in the AI landscape because it also has your calendar, your emails, your texts.
It has to understand you and be grounded in your personal context, like your routine, your relationships, your communications, and more.
Which are all contained on your device. And it's those devices, more than 2 billion of them in use globally, that provide Apple with the biggest advantage, says analyst Angelo Zeno at CFRA.
Those are very loyal consumers out there and will start to kind of utilize AI probably more so than any other consumer across any other ecosystem.
They won't need to download a new app or navigate to a particular browser or build trust in a new brand, says marketing professor Anjali Bal at Babson College.
There's so much nervousness in the market related to AI. But one of the things I always notice about Apple users is we have faith in Apple.
Apple isn't always the first mover on new technology, she says.
They typically wait and see what the market is going to do. And then after they see what the market is going to do, then they pounce and they do it better than the other companies.
And by partnering with ChatGPT rather than launching its own large language model, Apple can offload some of the risks now inherent to the technology, like hallucinations and bias, says Eric Seufert, an analyst at Mobile Dev Memo.
You've seen companies rush out some of their AI products to disastrous results, right? And just from a strategic standpoint and optics standpoint, that's probably something you'd prefer to avoid.
He says Apple is ultimately aiming to differentiate itself with its focus on user privacy. The company has touted that many AI features can run on device, avoiding the need to send so much user data to the cloud. I'm Megan McCarty-Carino for Marketplace.
Wall Street today wasn't so sure about Apple, but still had plenty to be happy about. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. We'll get the latest consumer price index on Wednesday, and regardless of what it says about shelter costs, the big takeaway for a lot of first-time home buyers right now is that things feel a bit impossible. According to census data, in the first quarter of this year, the median price of a home was over $420,000. That's about $100,000 more than it was before the pandemic. Those high prices plus higher mortgage rates means it's gotten even harder for young adults to move from renting to owning. So they're increasingly turning to their parents for financial help. Abha Bhattarai is at the Washington Post, and she recently wrote about the trend. Abha, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So when I first saw your story, I figured this was maybe about parents giving their kids cash for a down payment, but it seems like there are a lot of ways parents are helping out. What are they?
Yeah, there are so many ways that parents are helping their children. And I think, like you, I assumed that help with a down payment, just sort of a cash gift, was going to be what we ran up against the most. But it turns out, in part because housing has become so unaffordable, home prices have gone through the roof in the last few years, that a lot more first-time buyers are needing help from their parents to actually co-sign those mortgages because, they maybe don't even have the incomes to qualify in the first place.
Yeah, and an increasingly popular route is also taking out a home equity loan.
Yeah, some of the parents I spoke to had, borrowed against their existing homes and were lending that money to finance their children's homes, thinking that it was sort of a better transaction than having to pay 7% or whatever the going rate for mortgages is to the bank.
I guess, borrowing against your house requires you to own a home to begin with, but a lot of the families you talk to are not exactly wealthy ones.
It really runs the gamut. And one of the leading concerns among the housing economists that I talk to about this trend is that as it becomes more necessary for parents to step in and help their children buy their first homes, it has the effect of making it that much harder for other people to break into the housing market when they don't have that help. And so we're exacerbating inequality in a lot of ways by having to rely on so much financial help from parents.
Why do you think so many parents have been willing to step in and help their kids acquire a home?
I think for so long, we've thought of home ownership as this really important milestone. I mean, it's the American dream. And for a lot of families, it's the most surefire way of accumulating long-term wealth and generational wealth that they can pass down. And I think parents are starting to realize that if they have the means to help their children, that maybe it makes sense to help their children. And a lot of the realtors I talked to said that many families were now thinking of, helping their children buy a house as sort of a generational family transaction instead of just like a one-time gift to their children.
Yeah, very different framing. On the other side of the equation, it seemed like a lot of the young adults you spoke to seemed to sort of have to put away their pride almost in getting help. Did they expect to need that from their parents to help them buy a home?
Almost everybody I spoke to said that they really had wanted to buy a house without the help. But at the same time, they said, the market is so tough right now. And if I just kind of worried that if I didn't take this help now, that it was going to be that much harder for me to buy a house in 5 years or 10 years, whenever that might be. And so I think that is sort of changing the equation a bit for a lot of people. And it's changing the way that young adults and their parents are thinking about how they buy a house and the way they talk about it. A lot of realtors said that there just was less shame around it. People, this used to be it was very common for parents to help out, but people didn't really talk about it. And now the housing market has become so tough that it's kind of like, well, of course I need my parents to help out. And so that's sort of taken away the stigma a little bit.
Yeah, I hate to end on a sour note, but where might this leave people who don't have the resources like a family home or parents to lean on when it comes to homeownership?
You know, it's not clear just how permanent these shifts in the housing market are. We are starting to see home builders build a lot more homes, especially smaller entry-level homes. At the same time, we might start to see prices eventually come down. Interest rates could come down in the next several months, and all of that could change the dynamics a bit here. But for now, it's really tough for first-time homebuyers to break in.
Abha Bhattarai is an economics correspondent at The Washington Post. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Just in time for peak summer travel season comes a path to a potential shakeup at Southwest Airlines. Elliott Investment Management announced it's taken a nearly $2 billion stake in the carrier. In a statement, the activist investor firm said, quote, Southwest's rigid commitment to a decades-old approach has inhibited its ability to compete in the modern airline industry. Ouch. The firm thinks, though, that there's room for improvement. Southwest is the fourth largest airline by revenue. Marketplace's Daniel Ackerman looks into what it might take to turn the company around.
One thing Southwest had going for it, says transportation researcher Naveen Eluru at the University of Central Florida.
It enjoyed a patronage, if you would, of a customer loyalty.
Then came December 2022. That's when bad weather combined with antiquated scheduling software and caused the airline to cancel more than 16,000 flights and strand millions.
When you can't get your vacation for your holidays, all that loyalty is ruined. I used to travel Southwest, but now I also hesitate to buy the ticket.
Customers departed for other carriers. Since then, gradually, they've been coming back.
I flew on Southwest this morning and happy to report it was on time and it was a full flight.
Nicholas Rupp is an economics professor at East Carolina University, at least when he's not chatting with reporters while on vacation in Florida. He says Southwest has made some unusual business decisions.
One way Southwest helps keep costs down is only having Boeing aircraft. That way their pilots only need to be trained in one aircraft type.
But relying on one supplier for your most important assets is also risky. Boeing was supposed to deliver dozens of its 737 model this year. So far, it hasn't. Plus, says Henry Hardevelt, an airline analyst with Atmosphere Research Group,
the 737 doesn't lend itself to long-haul international flying, for example, to Europe or into deep South America or to Asia.
Adding other aircraft models to its fleet could help Southwest compete on new routes. But Hardevelt says it'll be tough to turn the proverbial plane around overnight because
the airline industry is not like other industries. It still has a lot of government regulation
on things like aircraft maintenance and staffing levels. So Hardevelt says Southwest could hit some turbulence en route to boosting its prospects. I'm Daniel Ackerman for Marketplace.
Coming up,
I've always been interested in climbing something super tall.
As long as you're not afraid of heights. But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 69 points, 0.2%, to finish at 38,868. The Nasdaq added 59 points, a little over 1/3%, to close at 17,192. And the S&P 500 picked up 13 points, 0.25%, to end at 5360. Daniel Ackerman was just telling us about that activist investor calling for change at Southwest Airlines. That sent shares 7% higher. Elsewhere in the industry, American Airlines declined just under 0.1%. United Airlines Holdings was basically unchanged. And Delta Airlines ascended 0.1%. AI chipmaker NVIDIA kept up its run after its 10-to-1 share split. It added 0.75%. Bonds fell. The yield on the 10-year T-note rose to 4.46%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance, helping protect small businesses and the owners that run them. Whether a plumber, accounting business, or restaurant, Progressive can help with over 30 customizable coverages. Online quotes available in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. And by Crowley, a logistics, energy, and maritime solutions company serving commercial and government sectors with nearly 135 years of innovation, a commitment to sustainability, and an ambition to carry the world forward. Learn more at crowley.com. And by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to raising awareness and accelerating action on America's fiscal challenges to build a brighter economic future for the next generation. Learn more at pgpf.org.
WNYC is supported by Brooklyn Solar Works, a Brooklyn-based solar design and installation firm bringing clean energy to homes and businesses in New York City. More at brooklynsolarworks.com or 347-377-2705.
WNYC members make it all happen. As an independent, not-for-profit news outlet, listener support is the largest share of our funding. Your donations allow us to bring you in-depth and comprehensive news every day. And just as you rely on WNYC, know that WNYC relies on you. Please become a member now. Just visit WNYC.org and click on Donate.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. Coming up in the 7 o'clock hour, of all things considered, France's president calls snap elections after the far right makes some big gains in European Union polls. We'll have that and much more in the 7 o'clock hour. Stay tuned.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kristen Schwab. This month marks 55 years since the Stonewall riots in New York City. It's one reason why June is Pride Month. During this year's celebrations, you may find companies' messaging around the events to be a little subdued. Target says it's scaling back its Pride marketing plans. Last year, the retailer became a focus of homophobic and transphobic comments. This year, Target's Pride merchandise will only be sold in select stores as well as online. It's worth noting that many major companies say they're not fazed by last year's backlash. Consulting firm Gravity Research surveyed 200 corporate communications execs. Most said they're not making changes to their Pride marketing. But as Marketplace's Savannah Marr reports, some of corporate America may take a more quiet and careful tone.
Over a year since Bud Light faced an anti-trans boycott, the brand's sales still haven't rebounded. Bud's reputation on both sides of the political spectrum was damaged. Enter 5-time NFL MVP Peyton Manning. In this 2024 Super Bowl ad, Manning saunters up to a crowded bar with a rustic vibe. Cowboy hats, football jerseys.
What are you having? 2 Bud Lights, please.
A couple of burly, middle-aged guys give Manning the stink eye. And then...
Actually, make it around for the bar.
Round for the bar! Tim Bennett, who heads up the LGBTQ-focused marketing firm Triberry Productions, sees Bud Light reaching back out to a familiar demographic.
Look, we haven't left you. We're still here. We get you. We know you.
After all the Bud Light drama, Bennett says it's easy to forget how it started, with a brief and frankly unremarkable collaboration with a transgender TikTok star.
It was nothing. There was nothing controversial about it, right? It was just the fact that the person was trans. That's all.
But it made transphobic customers angry. Like, film yourself running over a bunch of Bud Lights with your SUV angry. Bennett says the brand became toxic to broad swaths of the market, especially after Bud Light issued a quasi-apology. The brand's parent company didn't respond to an interview request. Other brands took note of Bud's misfortune and are proceeding with caution.
Whether you want to call it the Bud Light or the Target effect, something has happened.
Which is not to say corporate America is abandoning LGBTQ consumers. Sure, companies may value diversity and want to be inclusive, but this is also about making money.
It's a market that's $1 trillion consumer base.
Joanna Schwartz, a professor of marketing at Georgia College and State University, says that's why big companies have loudly celebrated Pride for the last decade or so. But now that transphobia has become commonplace in right-wing politics, Schwartz says marketing to LGBTQ consumers is no longer an easy win.
It is a fine line to walk. You can create that impact for people around your brand without doing anything that others might perceive as risque or daring.
Schwartz says not all companies are retreating. For example, Apple has held steady with a trans-inclusive campaign. But after last year's backlash, Target discontinued its Pride collection for kids. The North Face defended, but then didn't resume its partnership with a drag queen. Skittles backed off from 2023's trans-inclusive package designs in favor of a pretty standard 6-color rainbow promotion. And for the first time since 2020, Calvin Klein's Pride campaign won't be headlined by any out trans or non-binary models. None of these companies responded to an interview request.
Having companies back away in the face of anti-LGBTQ plus threats or aggression is really concerning.
TJ Billard is a professor of media studies at Northwestern. They say we're seeing the return of generic, apolitical mass pride marketing. But algorithms and influencer promotions mean brands can save the edgier stuff for a more precise audience.
Whether that's TikTok or Instagram or whatever, like, queer people are going to see queer supportive messages from these companies. It's everyone else who's not going to.
Billard says it's easier than ever for companies to offer inclusive messaging to the LGBTQ community in places other consumers won't see it.
Are they alienating queer consumers? Probably.
But many brands seem to have made a decision that in this political climate, pushing back against homophobia and especially transphobia comes at too high of a cost. I'm Savannah Marr for Marketplace.
It's not even technically summer yet, but it sure feels like deep summer in the southwestern U.S. We're talking highs of around 105 degrees in parts of Arizona and Southern California this week. Scientists predict it's going to be another extreme season, one that'll have people across the country cranking up the AC more often. And that will put more pressure on some energy grids than they can handle. Marketplace's Elizabeth Troval reports.
The bad news is if temps peak far above normal this summer, we could end up short on electricity. Joshua Rhodes with UT Austin has the good news.
It's actually better than it has been in the past couple of years.
Thanks to new electricity generation coming online.
Like wind and solar, as well as energy storage.
And each region faces unique challenges, says Mark Olson with the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, which identified an elevated risk of supply shortages in the Southwest and also
in New England. Recently, there's been some generation that is retired.
That's also true in the Midwest. That region is bringing online new electricity sources to help.
But the pace of additions isn't maybe keeping up. And so you can have shortfalls in the Midwest during heat waves, especially if the wind performance is low.
And when that happens, the Midwest may have to rely on neighbors for electricity. But that's not an option in Texas, where David Blackman is a consultant. That state has its own independent grid.
We have to have adequate capacity on the grid for all situations, and we don't.
He'd like to see more natural gas on the grid as a buffer, especially during winter cold snaps. Still, though, the price per kilowatt hour on his summer electric bill ain't pretty.
That's doubled in 4 years. Double.
As energy generation evolves and weather becomes more extreme, Ramteam Siashansi, an engineer with Carnegie Mellon University, says the risks to the grid are also changing.
30 years ago they were looking at, okay, on occasion, a handful of the generators are going to fail.
Nowadays, generation is more likely to be knocked out by a common event like
the temperatures get very, very high.
And that extreme heat can create even more risk to power generators. I'm Elizabeth Troval for Marketplace.
More extreme weather events are going to require a more resilient energy grid. The Biden administration wants to add more sources of renewable power to shore things up. With the Inflation Reduction Act, $400 billion will go towards incentives for electric vehicles, building electrification, and renewables like wind power. Wind energy is getting a lot of attention right now. The sector is expected to more than double over the next 25 years, according to Department of Energy forecasts. KUNC's Ray Solomon has more on what its growth means for rural economies.
A gale is tearing through Colorado's rural eastern plains. It's an inspiring sound for Benjamin Sussman.
It is generating power. all the farms near here. That's why there's so many built out in the plains.
Sussman is a student in the Renewable Energy Department at Northeastern Junior College in Sterling, Colorado. It's one of the few degree programs in the country for aspiring wind turbine technicians like Sussman.
I'm hoping to go straight into the wind industry.
While his classmates fiddle with wires and circuitry in the lab, the 22-year-old suits up in safety gear to practice the ladder climb. Eventually, he'll be scaling actual turbines. He adjusts his hard hat, buckles into a harness, and up he goes. In this simulation, Sussman's ladder is only about 20 feet tall. In the field, he'll have to climb turbines as high as 300 feet or more.
I've always been interested in climbing something super tall. I climbed a lot of trees as a kid.
But Sussman isn't just indulging his love of heights here. He's making a really smart career move. Demand for wind turbine technicians is booming. It's actually the fastest growing occupation in the country, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics.
So it has been difficult to keep up.
Kevin Schrader is with Invenergy, a clean energy producer with wind farms across the globe. Last year, his company doubled their domestic wind technician workforce to 400, and this year, they're planning to hire hundreds more.
Each quarter, we have more projects, and so we continually have job postings out there looking for qualified individuals.
National and local climate goals for a rapid transition away from fossil fuel power has been feeding the growth. It also helps that renewables have been getting cheaper to produce. Since 2010, the country's wind capacity more than tripled. It's now the U.S.'s largest source of carbon-free energy, and most of it is produced in rural communities like the area around Sterling, Colorado,
where there's ample real estate for wind turbines and solar panels. So that is pretty common for us to be developing in rural areas across the United States.
Which means all those wind tech jobs will be rural jobs, and high-paying ones at that. The median income for wind techs is just under $62,000 a year. Jason Winter teaches in the Renewable Energy program at the Junior College in Sterling. He grew up in the area and sees the clean energy transition as a potential game changer for the locals.
If they don't have a family farm to work on, they really don't have a lot of opportunity. And so now when we have all of a sudden really good paying jobs that makes sense to stay here, I think that's huge for the community.
After coming off the ladder, Benjamin Sussman says he can't wait to take advantage of all that rural opportunity.
I think this is honestly one of the greatest mix of things that I could do. It involves climbing things, involves working with my hands. There's an electrical component, a mechanical component. I think it's a mix of all the things that I've thought about growing up.
He's got an internship this summer maintaining turbines at a wind farm on Colorado's eastern plains, and he hopes to continue the work when he graduates next winter. In Sterling, Colorado, I'm Ray Solomon for Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by the United States Postal Service, offering postage stamps for purchase at more than 40,000 supermarkets, drugstores, office suppliers, and wholesale clubs. And by Raymond James, tailored wealth management, banking, and capital markets solutions for clients' unique needs. Disclosures at raymondjames.com. And by C3 Generative AI, verified, traceable answers, secure, hallucination-free, LLM-agnostic, IP liability-free. Learn more at c3.ai.
This final note on the way out today, saw this in the Wall Street Journal. What was once a riskier real estate tenant is now a safer bet. Food services accounted for 19% of all retail leases last year, as Americans spend more time and money at restaurants. Low unemployment, rising wages, and foodie culture are behind the boost. Analysts say millennials' tendency to stay single longer also results in more eating out. Hey, It's one thing we millennials aren't killing off. Our daily production team includes Andy Corbin, Alize Hassan, Maria Hollenhorst, Sarah Leeson, Sean McHenry, and Sophia Terenzio. I'm Kristen Schwab. We'll be back tomorrow. This is APM.